Alright, so I'm back in Malibu. It's a beautiful day here. Let me show you what I'm thinking. So here's the scene I'm working with. Using this scene as inspiration, I will be moving things around, but I'm going to try to stay fairly close to what I'm seeing. Painting over an old 11 by 22 inch painting. I'll be using my usual limited palette. I've got cadmium yellow lemon, cadmium yellow medium, titanium white, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and some permanent red medium. Starting with a mixture of titanium white, burnt sienna, cadmium yellow medium. This is sort of an opaque orange color. There's a rock here, and rocks in the foreground as well. It is so nice to be in Southern California. For those of you who don't know California geography, Southern California, where I am right now, is about a 6-hour drive from the Bay Area, which is where I live, by San Francisco. So it's a long haul to get down here, but the weather is quite different. It feels not quite like summer, but just beautiful spring weather. I'm so happy to be here. There are other differences as well. For example, the color of the water down here is different from the color of the water up north where I live. It's nice to have some beautiful weather, but also some different colors to play with. All right, I've added ultramarine to the mix, which makes sort of a dark brown color. Once I sketch out a rough idea of the shape, then I come in with darker values. It's really helpful, especially when painting over an old painting, to establish the darks as quickly as possible, just because it's so confusing. But you can see, once the rocks are in, it really starts taking shape. And I'm using a number 4 natural bristle filbert at this point. Now that the distant rock is blocked in, I'm realizing that the rocks in the foreground are a little too big in relation to the distant rocks. And also felt like this rock was too close to the center of the canvas or the panel. The top of this rock in the foreground goes up and obscures a bit of the distant rocks. And I'm still playing with shapes at this point. I can wipe out anything I want to if I feel like it's not working. So I'm just trying to get a nice arrangement of dark shapes here. All right, for the sky, starting with titanium white and phthalo blue. I've thinned the paint with odorless mineral spirits, but also a little bit of Gamblin's Neo McGilp, which is kind of like liquid, but it doesn't smell as strong, so I've been using it lately. And I've switched over to a number 6 natural bristle flat, just because it holds more paint. All right, I mixed up a mid-tone blue-green using some phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, titanium white, and a bit of cadmium yellow medium. I did use a straight edge for the horizon. It's really difficult to draw a straight line, so I carry a homemade straight edge with me for that reason. There's going to be white water over here, and there's going to be some breaking waves as well. And so I'm keeping this mix thin. Just trying to reduce the painting to simple shapes, which is what I would do even if I wasn't painting over an old painting. And the tide is starting to come in. I may have to move my easel. All right, I'm establishing a water line here. I'm going to have wet sand that is reflecting some of the rocks. And then there'll be white water as well. The water line continues over here. All right, for the wet sand, I'm going with a warm green, and I've made this mixture using ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow medium, and a bit of alizarin crimson. I like to warm up my greens with alizarin. Such a useful color. I think I might include some dry sand in here, we'll see. And the wet sand in this area has a little more red in it, so I added a bit more alizarin. So nice to be out painting in weather like this. I can see why there was an art movement down here in Southern Cal, just because the weather is so good. You know, most of the early California Impressionists painted down here, mostly in Laguna, not up this far north in Malibu, but obviously they had the same weather. There's a cast shadow right in here, but the wet sand does continue like that. All right, for the dry sand, I've got a mixture of titanium white, burnt sienna, and a bit of ultramarine blue, and a touch of cadmium yellow medium. I'm doing my best to approximate the colors and values, but I'm not worried about getting them exact. I just need to cover the panel with shapes so that I can step back and see if I like the composition, see if any changes need to be made, and I'm almost there. The water is filling in, so I'm going to lose this rock reflection here, because right now there's periodic wet sand in this area, but it's going to be covered. But for the white water, I'm starting with a mixture of titanium white and a little bit of ultramarine blue, keeping the paint thin and the paint application somewhat sketchy here. I am trying to establish shapes, but when it comes to the white water, I do like to have spontaneity in the paint application, even early on. I often hold up my brush to the horizon when judging angles of things like, say, the water line or whatever. So that's a helpful thing to do. Line up your brush with the horizon and then see how it compares. I made this rock too big, making it a little bit smaller. Last step is the shadow shape for this rock. And I'll darken this rock just a little bit. So at this point, I step back about 10 feet, take a look at the painting, looking at the shapes, trying to decide if anything needs to be changed. I don't like the shapes down here. I think it might be nice to have kind of the white water go like this, maybe. Something like that. After the block-in, I'll usually clean my palette for the next round of paint application, just so I have a nice clean working space so I don't get muddy colors. Now going in with thicker paint and more intentional strokes. So I try to load the brush, make a stroke or two, and then load the brush again, working from my darkest darks to my lightest lights. This shape is predominantly dark, but there are a variety of darks, so I am establishing the darkest of those darks. And I'm paying attention to the overall shape. I do not want to break up the overall shape, so I'm keeping the value range of my darks fairly narrow. I've added some blue to my dark mixture here because I'm seeing some blue tones in this portion of the rocks. Actually, I have some yellow still on the brush. That's all right. One thing about applying paint with intention is, even if it's not quite right, it looks like you meant to do it and nobody will question you. And even if they do, it doesn't really matter anyway. In these lower rocks, I'm actually seeing a bit more red, and I am exaggerating the colors that I'm seeing because I know that when I get this painting indoors, the colors will not seem as saturated. And I don't know, I just think it's nice to get a variety of colors into my shadow shapes and into my light shapes as well. It's that variety that makes the painting interesting and sort of alive, hopefully. There's a sky hole in this rock right here. I've painted it in the past and I've never been happy with the way it looks, but I'm going to try again, and so we'll see. I am going to put some bits of light on the rocks, but even the light bits are fairly dark in value. I think the biggest challenge is coming up with a good composition, or establishing a good composition. Once you've got the big shapes in place, this part of it's really fun, where you're trying to work into those shapes. And the shadow portion of the rocks in the foreground here are lighter actually in value than the rocks in the distance, and I'm actually able to see more color in these shadows because they're up close. Alright, so here is what I finished up with. This painting took about 2 hours to complete. It was finished on site. I really struggled with the reflection of the rocks in the foreground. I had to go over them several times. In particular, the value difference between the reflected blue sky and the reflected rock. This value difference right here. Getting that value balance is so important in order to have the reflections read properly. This painting did come out a bit darker than usual. That's one of the challenges of painting on the beach or something like snow, where there's a reflection coming up from below. So even though I had the panel turned away from the sun so that it was, there was no direct light on it, there was a lot of reflected light from the sand. So everything appeared lighter in value, and then I get it inside and it's darker. But even still, I am happy with the results, in particular with the reflection of the rocks in the wet sand in the foreground. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. I've also put a PayPal tip jar down below, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.